Welcome to Cycling Conversations with inGamba, where we celebrate the art and the culture of the sport, the rhythm, the ritual, and the refinement that surrounds it. inGamba means in the know, and as with our cycling tours, these conversations are meant to bring you behind the scenes in our world. This is a space for when sport meets elevated living, where a former pro racer dissects the brutality of racing a classic, followed by a cycling CEO sharing their favorite spot for a post-ride Negroni. Along the way is our creative director and award-winning cycling photographer James Startt, who joins me, Molly Hurford, to unpack the cultural currents shaping the sport and the destinations that make it so beautiful. To learn more about our award-winning bike tours and to join us, visit inGamba.pro or the link in the show notes. Hello, and welcome to Cycling Conversations with inGamba. I'm Molly Hurford, co-host of the podcast, and today we are talking all about the magazine. If you are new to inGamba, you might not know, but we actually have our own magazine. We publish it once or twice a year, and it is a gorgeous, glossy, artistic look at this wonderful sport of cycling. And this podcast episode really is celebrating that. We're talking to a few of the writers for different articles in this issue, but beyond these amazing writers that we were talking to today, there are so many incredible articles within these pages. As you may know, at inGamba, we really value more than just our time on the bike. That's obviously the cornerstone of every great trip, but we also believe that the food, the drinks, the scenery, all of that really adds up to this beautiful, rich cultural experience, and the magazine truly captures that. If you're interested in getting a copy of the magazine, please get in touch. We'll include a link in the show notes so you can contact us. But the best way to get an issue is to join us on a trip. And we have a lot. The 2027 calendar is out now at inGamba.pro. So definitely check it out. And we would love to have some of these conversations with you in person. But for now, let's get into this episode where we are talking about a few of our favorite articles in this issue. I'm so excited to be joined by two fabulous writers. So we have James Startt, award-winning cycling photographer and creative director at inGamba. And we have Colin O'Brien, who, your writing for this issue of the magazine made me stop inviting my husband to dinner and just start going to dinner myself. So he doesn't thank you for that, but I certainly do. And I'm Molly Hurford, longtime cycling journalist and host of the inGamba podcast. So welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this issue.
Thank you, Molly. I knew I wanted to have Colin in the magazine. It was actually Joao who suggested it, but it was a really a no-brainer. I had no idea, however, that it would have any effect on your marriage, and I hope it's not a lasting one.
I think we'll be fine. We might just need to come on another inGamba trip and get back to sitting at the communal table to make it work. So bright sides. Okay, Colin, let's get right into this. Your amazing article, Party of One. James is going to have to talk about the illustrations because they make the idea of dining alone look so cool. But Party of One, what made you kind of come up with this concept and really bring it to life?
I think when I was chatting to James and Joao about doing something in the magazine, it was, usually, obviously, I've kind of been around inGamba a long time, and in previous issues of the magazine, I was doing more than one thing at once. At this time, being able to, really dial it back and just say, like, what do these trips mean to me? What does a good bike vacation mean to me? And so then I kind of had two or three ideas about riding and different things about food. And then I got to this point where, we all work in cycling and travel, and you go to these places and you go to them with the intention of, being in a crowd, watching a race, or being on a trip and meeting people and enjoying company of friends and family and these things. But the reality is that you actually spend a ton of time on your own, right? Either in hotels or in airports or just driving or, whatever the case may be. So for me, it's always been, if I went to a bike race or if I was doing travel articles, there is the impulse, to just get to the hotel and lie in the bed and just like, I don't know. I want to say read a book, but it's probably like doom scrolling or whatever, but I think it's always better to just get up off your ass and go out and explore. And I've always thought that it's kind of, I cook as well. And this idea, I talk to friends who cook and they say, oh, well, I wouldn't do that just for myself. And I've always thought, well, I mean, if I wouldn't do it for myself, who would I do it for? Maybe that's kind of selfish, but with that same mentality, I take to solo dining, and it's not something I do a ton of because my partner would leave me, and there'd be, but when you get a chance to do it, it is actually a joy, particularly these days when it seems like, well, attention economy is a bit of a cliche, but you're pulled in so many different directions. And this idea that you can go to, a bar and get some small plates or sit down at a table in a trattoria and just do nothing but focus on that for like 2 hours, have a couple of glasses of wine, have 3 dishes, and just not talk to anybody and chill out. I just thought was something I loved without realizing I loved. So then when I was thinking about, I was like, right, well, everything else in the magazine is going to be about the groups, and the staff are so amazing and all the people you meet. And that is true. But I was like, there is a different side to these trips where people are going to be on their way and leaving. And I'm like, maybe I should, focus them on something that is not quite as enjoyable as, sitting around the table in Lecky or, being somewhere else with a group of wonderful inGamba people. But, if you're on your way home through an airport or through another city, there's no reason why you can't treat yourself just because, you're not with anyone else.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I loved that concept, and it really made me think differently about. So I was just at the Sea Otter Cycling Classic, so the huge bike festival, and I don't need to tell you two, but for listeners, it's massive. Thousands of people. You're just constantly surrounded. It's so overstimulating. And there were a couple times where I actually thought about your article. And okay, admittedly, Sea Otter does not lend itself to haute cuisine on site. But I did make myself a nice tuna salad sandwich in the van and sit and like quiet and just enjoy a book for a little bit. So even if I didn't have the stylish nature of the party of one, I was still engaging in my own solo experience, and it was wonderful, very needed.
Yeah, it was a story that resonated very quickly to me, and actually in this magazine, in the previous issues, sometimes we would organize them, say geographically, by the different countries that inGamba frequents, and this magazine I wanted to organize by our 3 key words, Mangia, Beve, Bici, and so the opening section is Mangia. And when Colin came up with this, I just saw it. I said, "This is going to be the opening feature, and it's going to be just great." And yeah, it just maybe it's cycling journalism, maybe it's Europe, I don't know. But I'm on the road a lot as well, and doesn't matter. When you're at a bike race, I like to say I never know who I'm going to see, but I'm always going to see friends. And yet sometimes, you get done late or whatever. And yeah, sure, it'd be easy to stay in your room, but I always insist on going out, even if it's by myself. I think it was Dario Pegoriti had that great line, day is done. And I just love that tradition. The day is done. I'm not going to eat dinner and go back to work for 3 more hours. That's the end of my day. That's the end. That's the bookmark, and I'm going to sit back and reflect on it. And I need to be at a table to do that. So I thought Colin really captured that whole experience beautifully, as did the illustrator, which you mentioned, Tommaso Montagnani, who actually he's a friend of mine here in France, but he actually his family home was just a couple of kilometers from Lecky. He's like, "What? You guys have got this little Borgo in Lecky?" And I was like, "Yeah, because that's like my grandma lives just up the road." But
Cool.
it's interesting because he's actually a musician first, a bass player, tremendous bass player. And then he took up drawing and illustrating 5, 6 years ago. And I remember I sent him one of my pictures of Marco Pantani, which he drew. And I've seen his style develop, and I really, really have come to like it. And so I asked him if he'd be interested, and he did a couple of tests, and I just thought they were spot on. He really captured the elegance that can be, I think, this sort of simple elegance of just being at the table by yourself and enjoying a good meal. Emphasis on good meal. Um, and um, and Colin obviously, understood that and focused on that. And I think it's something you and Joao have discussed and bonded over the years as well a bit. And Yeah, I mean, food is so important to inGamba. It's one of the things that really attracted me to the brand. And most of the time, yeah, we're sitting at a table together sharing a meal. But like I said, in I think when I did the little intro to the magazine, what Colin shows here is that any time is a good time for a great meal.
Absolutely. And Colin, I have two questions. One is going to be, what is like the most recent fantastic solo dining experience that you've had? And the other, I think a lot of people, and I include myself in this, but I also include, there's so many people who have never gone out to dine alone other than maybe the occasional like airport meal while they're waiting for their flight. The idea of like going to dinner, taking themselves to dinner solo just doesn't even click as something that they could do or should do. So I'd also love if you could maybe give a couple of like tips for getting over that initial like nervous reaction to showing up in a restaurant by yourself. And and maybe even mention that we don't scroll whilst we eat. The doom scrolling tends to not really enhance the experience, shall we say.
No, for sure. The scrolling kills it. I mean, it's a little, it's kind of, you despair when you hear things. I have a few friends that work in TV and film, and they talk about people double screening, and they say they'll rewrite something because it's too complicated because now people are on their phone, right? And you sit down to watch this show or this movie that people, dozens or hundreds of people have worked on for months, if not years, and you can't give it the time, right? I think that's a little bit depressing. I mean, I don't want to sound kind of holier than thou with that because I do it. We all do it. But I think when you get the chance, particularly if you're somewhere special, and you go into this place and somebody's in the kitchen and they prepared all this stuff, and you've got a cocktail or you've got it could be a breakfast thing. I love maybe breakfast is a good way to segue into solo dining because people don't stare at you as much if you go in on your own. But you get your beautiful cup of coffee and somebody's made you an amazing plate, and it's such a shame to spend half of your time, you know, staring at social media. So, um, I guess I'd start with breakfast. I think when I started doing it, uh, probably we didn't doom scroll. That was it was probably before all that. So it made it a little bit easier. You could just rock up and have a book in your hand, right?
You're just
Like,
waiting for your like pager to go off just in case.
yeah, I'm not quite that old, but like it was, mobile phones were a little bit more basic. But I think the other thing is just, I mean, I've always found that restaurants are quite happy to see you, particularly a lot of places, if they have seats at the bar, they'll squeeze you in somewhere. And, I mean, you're unlikely to make a fuss. So I think that's great. And then I just kind of ignore everyone else. I mean, that's the beauty of it as well, is that you don't have to impress anybody. You just kind of like, uh, you just rock up and do your own thing. I can remember going, geez, I can't even remember what the race was, where we were, but I was with a photographer who's still a friend of mine, and she's amazing. Uh, And we finished, as James has said, day is done, and we'd finished, and we were all kind of, well, probably she was dirtier than I was, because the writers don't tend to do an awful lot during the day. But, we're walking around, but we're in all our crappy clothes, and, your trainers, and you've got your backpack and everything. And she just like rocked up straight through the door of like the swankiest hotel you could find in the city. And, the porter opened the door like she belonged there, and the waiters came out, and it was a real lesson to me. I was like, oh God, like I look like crap. But if you just kind of rock in and look like you're supposed to be there, people will generally, react quite well to it. In terms of the last solo dining, I actually got in trouble for that last night, because unbeknownst to my partner, she was on a work trip. And it's kind of a thing, I'm sure everybody's relationship is different, but there's some things like you won't watch if there's a movie, right? And it's like, we have to watch that together. It's kind of an unspoken thing. And with certain, if I'm going to go to a great deal of effort making it a dinner, maybe, it's like, it's probably nicer to do that when we're both at home. But it was a beautiful day here on Monday. Felt like, a real sunny day, real kind of the first signs of summer. And I had the day off, and it was a friend's birthday, and a bunch of us met for a couple of beers. And then I walked home. It was getting towards dinner time. I was kind of hungry, and I just decided to cook like a Sunday roast. I got a beautiful piece of roast beef from the butcher's. Did that, spent 2 or 3 hours making gravy, had a glass of wine, listened to some records, and just kind of lived in my own little world. And I don't know how it even came up, but yeah, she was a little bit upset when she, because
This
sometimes,
has been marriage counseling with the inGamba Cycling Podcast.
So, I'd say you can do it on your own as well. But if it was eating out, I tend to go quite a bit. I travel into an office once or twice a week, and I'll go for a long lunch. I like, particularly, a long lunch is nice during the day, and I've got a couple of places around here that I like to hit. So I don't always get to go to the, it's not always somewhere swanky in Italy or Spain or whatever, but I do try. It's something I try to practice regularly.
I love it. I love it. Now, before we wrap up, we should talk about noting swanky places in Italy and Spain. We have a fabulous feature on Siena in the magazine as well. James, do you want to maybe talk about that? And I don't know if either of you have some eating recommendations for Siena that we should probably mention, but
Yeah.
I'm all ears.
Well, it is a perfect link, because I have some very memorable moments of eating alone in Siena on the piazza. And it's not, those restaurants maybe are not the best restaurants in Siena. They're actually most definitely not. But part of eating alone, is atmosphere as well. And sitting there, and looking up at the old clock tower, where Strade finishes, and where they have the horse races in the summer and everything. It's just pretty spectacular. And the one thing that's so wonderful about Italy and Spain and certain parts of, especially Southern Europe, is that, in these countries, there is such a tradition of living outside. A, because apartments are small. B, because it gets so hot for such long summers, and they have to get out. And the piazzas just come alive, and it's still very much the case. And even in a major city like Siena, there's going to be families out, kids running around, and you could just sit there and watch the world go by. You don't need, it's okay if you have a book. It's okay if you have a screen even, but you're really not going to have much time for any of them, because there's so much happening out there. And sometimes I'm just having a pizza and a glass and a pitcher of wine, and that's just fine. Didn't say a liter. I didn't say how big the pitcher was.
Yeah. I know how big,
pitcher,
James.
reasonably sized pitcher.
Yeah,
Yeah, we frequent the same places, I'm sure. The pitchers are generous.
Yeah. So I would say that's one of my most memorable ones. And then yes, it also Siena's a place that is close to the heart of inGamba since it's so close to Lecce. And then we have obviously vacations, trips built around it with Strade and everything. Um, and it's a town that's just I've really come to love the last 10 years. And I just thought for the magazine it would be wonderful to have a travel piece on Siena, city past and present. And I knew exactly who I wanted to call up to be the writer for that one, which is another friend of mine and another Irish friend, if you will. His name is Barry Ryan, who's a tremendous writer as well. And I knew that he actually has a PhD in Italian literature, and has spent his career working in cycling. And so I knew he was the perfect person to mix together the cultural history of the city as well as its cycling history and kind of intertwine it perfectly. And that's what he did. And I loved it. I mean, we have some amazing writing in this issue, I think. And Colin and Barry lead the way with, without a doubt. They're both tremendous writers. I mean, I reread that and laughed at some of and was just, blinking my eyes. It's like, wow, how did you place that Dante quote in there? I mean, he's just, and then seamlessly with some sort of reference to cycling. So it was, in terms of Colin's piece around art of eating alone, cultural and historical and cycling, a history of Siena. I'm really proud of this magazine and the features that are its foundation, like these.
Now that we've covered eating alone, we are going to shift gears to talking about the bike. So we brought in Bill Strickland to chat with us about his incredible article in this issue, all about finding flow on the bike at any age, at any speed. But before we do, quick reminder that you can also have these conversations with us in person. Our 2027 trip calendar is available now. There are still some spots available for a few of our 2026 trips. So if you are looking to experience cycling in the best way humanly possible, the best roads, the best bikes, the best people, the best food, the best drinks, definitely check out all of our upcoming trips over at ingamba.pro. There is something for everyone, and we would love to see you on the ride. And with that, let's get into this conversation with Bill and James. All right. Hello, we are here with Bill Strickland, Editorial Director of the Hearst Enthusiast Group. Do I have that exact title right?
We're enthusiasts.
No, you are such an enthusiast. I mean, you are literally the enthusiast who really got me started in cycling journalism. I'm also joined by the amazing James Startt, the Editorial Director at inGamba, award-winning cycling photographer. Actually, let's do a bit of a how long have we all known each other? Let's make us all feel real bad about our ages. James, you and Bill, how far back do you two go?
Gosh, boy, Bill and I go back to, I think it was 1999, and I think I knew of Bill and he knew of me, but he called me, contacted me. Lance Armstrong had just won the Tour de France, and he said, you know what? We have this friend of ours, Mark Reedy, suggested I contact you, and just basically said, you might have some needs in Europe, and you're well placed for that. And within a couple of weeks, we established a contract as European correspondent for bicycling, which lasted, I believe, 15 years, Bill.
Yeah, it was a long.
It was a good long run, huh?
Exactly. Reedy connected us. That's exactly what happened.
And I had worked with Mark at Bicycle Guide, and we'd raced together in the Midwest. I think we identified a couple crashes we participated in, and
you crashed on a turtle, James. That was
that too. That was not with Reedy though.
Story.
Yeah, I did crash on a turtle.
No, was the turtle okay?
I didn't ask. My bike was okay though. That was the end of my state championship pursuit, though.
It was like, Reedy being Reedy. That's one of the first things he said about you.
I think he knew I would like that.
Yeah.
I like all that weird shit of
You,
cycling.
you do. Yeah. I crashed on a turtle at the state championships. So one of my more forgettable racing memories, but that's okay. It
That
helped
feels right.
if it I did not know it, but if it helped us connect on a deeper level, Bill, then that's great. And then we
Yeah.
both, both Bill and I, spent some time in Indiana, Northwest Indiana, and somehow fell in love with this. At the time, was a very kind of obscure sport, especially if you're growing up in Indiana, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually, because all of a sudden, if you're a cycling fan with all the algorithms and everything, every race, every sort of action is relayed and posted so many times. I mean, the Roubaix Velodrome sprint with, Van Aert and Pogacar was beautiful. I mean, I loved it, but I mean, I've seen it so many times now. And, back when Bill and I were getting into this, cycling for us was this precious little sport that you had to seek out. You had to wait weeks, if not months, to get maybe the latest copy of Velo News that might have had race reports and results from 3 months before. And, I think it was just before the Tour de France that we would get to see a few minutes of Paris-Roubaix. It was this really precious thing. And when I was getting into it, I was actually living in Africa and in West Africa and French-speaking Africa. And I would every month go down to the capital city and get the French magazine Miroir de Cyclisme. And then I would come back and work for a month translating that. So it was, and trying to, that's kind of how I learned French. So it was this very precious thing you really had to search out. And that is just not the case anymore, for better or worse.
But both, right? I think
Yeah.
better and worse. Like there's more, like I'm sitting, sometimes I'll be like watching a race on my phone while I'm walking somewhere, and it's incredible. It's so amazing. But there's some romanticism that's been lost with it.
Absolutely. Which, I mean, really is the heart of why we're here. We're obviously at Ngamba. Our goal is to bring the romantic back into cycling, bring that intentionality back into cycling. I think we've really done that with this issue of the magazine, which Bill, you contributed to. You wrote this great article, The Flow. So let's maybe talk about this. What was the impetus for writing this one, Bill? And what's the overall message?
Yeah, well, it's so weird. I was actually in France. I was in Provence uh, on vacation, doing a bit of writing when James called me when I was there, and he was just like, we'd love you to write something. What do you got? And he gave me a few, ideas of what I might touch on. And I knew right away, we started talking about, this idea of where I am in my life and, where Jim is too, where we all are, I think. And just how, for me, it's been a little bit of a struggle to accept the cyclist I am now. And it's recently come around in the past 2 or 3 years, and I'm like having a ton of fun again. And it just got me thinking about this idea that I think flow to me is really important in cycling. When I design a route, when I used to race, part of what I loved was just that feeling of being you're part of something and it's just happening. It's the school of fish thing, or the starlings, or the geese, or a pack of bike racers. And then just also, if you're out by yourself, like flow can be, it's not necessarily this like peaceful yogic amazing thing. Like battle can have a flow, right? Flow is
Mhm.
everywhere, and it really is about just submitting yourself and then contributing to what's happening. And that's where I am in my life with cycling. And I was like, well, this is what I want to write about, because uh, I think something in Gamba does really well on the trips and the rides and the lunches and the wine, uh, is flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I saw that on any trips I've been on with Ngamba. No matter what level the cyclist next to you is at, they're still going to feel as though they're in some kind of flow, whether they're like working a little bit extra hard and that's kind of pushing them into that state of flow, or they're actually pretty dialed back because they're having a chill day on the bike and they're almost for the first time sometimes looking around and
Right.
seeing what the what the scenery looks like, which is shocking for some of us that spent a lot of time staring down at our power meters and checking how many watts we were putting out instead of looking at this beautiful seaside vista on our right.
Absolutely. It was, yeah, I just, I've followed Bill for years and on the different channels and stuff, and I just noticed, often he, be it on Instagram post or whatever, he just had this way of kind of getting inside a really singular aspect of riding bikes and isolating it and showing why it's essential to a cyclist and us as cyclists. So I thought that was, that was the kind of the entry point for this story, and then he nailed it with the idea of the flow. I mean, just nailed it. Because yeah, we all, cycling means different things at different times in your life, and for both Bill and I, the racing is well behind us, and yet we still pride ourselves on, you know, being smooth, just the small details, and it still brings a lot of joy. Or, a descent. I can't climb. I never could climb great, but I certainly can't climb like I used to be able to. But I can still go down pretty well, and I just, or ride on the flats and just kind of keep a good pace, come out of a turn just right, and so he really nailed that, and I do agree. inGamba nails that. I was just on the Flanders trip, the first week of Flanders. We were with Audrey Vanderpoel, and we had Eros and Paolo as guides. And the last day we had this ride out to the seaside, and about the last 30K are really exposed into the wind, right? And all of a sudden, and we're there with Audrey, who, has won the Tour of Flanders, and all of a sudden, it splits up a little. Paolo is like keeping this really steady tempo, and we're kind of creating a little echelon so that the people in the other guests can, can work together, and we just ride together to the place. But at one point, one of the guys came a little bit off. Not everybody had ridden echelons or into the wind, and so we were kind of also trying to explain it, just pointing to where to be on the wheel or when to try to keep it all together. And, Paolo at one point, he just looked back at me, and I was about 50 meters back, but he knew where I was and I knew where he was. And we're just trying to keep it together. And it was like the flow incarnated. It was a really great moment. And so, and there's a lot of moments like that with inGamba, because, they're really focused on making sure everybody's covered. Right. And so when we're out there, we're just making sure we're always riding with people. We're talking, and just kind of keeping it together. And it's very much that experience of the flow. And it's really, like, I don't ride with people that much anymore, but I really enjoy being on an inGamba trip with the groups.
Yeah, I think that comes from Joao. When so he and I worked together bicycling years ago. He was on the ad side, I was on the other side, and traveling with Joao throughout Europe or anywhere, but especially in Europe and Italy, uh, he knows how to travel. It's not just like you are grinding sometimes, but then he also knows how to be like, we're just gonna pull in here and we're gonna have a 3-hour lunch, and we're gonna be late. We're gonna call them and let them know because this is what we should do right now. That guy lives in a flow, right? It's I find it amazing. He's really inspiring guy for
I
me.
so admire people that can do that.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that. I was like, well, okay, we're gonna work really hard, or we're gonna like fuck off. I didn't know you could do both, uh,
Absolutely.
and fit it all together like that in business, right? I was like, wow, this is cool.
I love it. I love it. Bill, I actually wanted to ask you, because you've been in the cycling industry in this space for so long, and as we kind of alluded to, it's changed so much. How have you kept really your love of cycling, both like personally and even professionally, like alive this long? Because my God, that's not easy.
I mean, yeah, I don't really know. I just love it. Like I think I'm a really simple person, and for some reason, some people really love collecting stamps or, building model. People can get what we get from lots of things. For me, it's just like, the tumblers fit together, the cycling's tumblers and my tumblers. And I've never look, there have been times it's a job, right? And when it's your job, sometimes it can, I'm sure both of you know this, Joie would know this. Sometimes it can really interfere with your passion. Also your passion can sometimes, not be the best thing for your career advancement sometimes.
As it turns out.
Who starts a print magazine? What's the point of that? So, Joao does, right? That's a total passion thing. Uh, but I just love it. I've said sometimes, lucky for me, cycling makes you healthy because I would do it anyway if it was bad for you. I would still
Mhm.
do it because I love it so much. But I've been really blessed that whatever my heart happens to match with this sports thing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
it's
cycling journalism is just such an interesting, weird field, right? Because you can write about cycling in so many different ways, and I think all of us have over the years, right? There's the very cut and dry, here's the race report. There's the training and nutrition of it all. And I did a power to weight article in this magazine. I did a very kind of straightforward interview with Francie Cook in this magazine. And I think what's cool about it is there are, 20 different articles in here, and all of them take this completely different approach to cycling, but all come back to cycling. And I think it's one of the only sports that you can really write about in so many different ways and styles and have it still make sense.
You can really find your niche, right? When Jim and I were doing the tour together or some other races or things, there are reporters there, like reporters, like, separate from like sort of a writer, right? They also write, but they're so good at reporting and just so diligent. And, I'm really good at taking notes and noticing things, but not on at that kind of pace and stitching a story together and just being able to sit down in a press room and make it come alive. I'm terrible at that. If I had to make I can kind of do it, but if I had the way, what Jim did for years and years and years, man, that is some kind of skill. And then, I'm over here like whatever, talking to a little girl picking flowers, on the side of the road, and that's my thing. And yeah, you can write about there's there's never a lack of things to write about or ways to write about them or styles that will work. And
Mhm.
there's it's a fascinating conversation really because what started as a conversation with Bill about where riding his bike, the actual act of riding is in his life, um, is a metaphor for so many different things about cycling in our lives, especially as journalists. Um, I mean, just like Bill, Molly, yourself. I mean, okay, I haven't raced in decades. I'm not going to say how many, but decades, and I have no interest in racing, but anymore myself. The whole focus on performance and things like that, and yet there's not a morning that I don't get up and one of my first things is, okay, what does my ride look like today? Is it going to be a ride? Is it going to be on the rollers on my balcony? Is it going to be an hour in the park? Is it maybe one of those days where I can get out into the valley and do 2.5, 3 hours? Or maybe in the winter it's the swimming pool. But it's still, even though I don't ride nearly as much as I used to, it's still a regular question that I ask myself, and it's just as important for me today as it ever was, even though I don't have objectives for racing and whatnot now. It's about staying fit and staying in the flow, if you want, and being connected to that part of my life. And then professionally the same way. Yeah, for years I was, you know, um, in the trenches, as we say on the races, and be it on the back of the moto.
Literally, in your case, just ditches, all
Ditches, yeah.
ditches.
I just went back into the ditch of Tour of Flanders on the Paterberg. I had a great time, I got to say. But yeah, I mean, I used to be also when I was covering, I was really focused on getting inside the players and the action and the sacrifice and maybe the joy of victory or the agony of defeat, if you want, and getting those. I love playing the scrum beat as a photographer with a microphone, trying to get 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 a story there. And I lived on the adrenaline of the press room and flipping stories, doing 2 and 3 things a night, be it pictures, be it maybe a rider journal, and then a daily feature. And then over the years, I've found that my passion is as strong as it ever was, but I've taken a sort of step back on every level in my regard for the sport. My pictures are no longer. I can still do the in your face race thing, and I still do it on occasion. But I've been much more attracted to the more pastoral side of the sport and the landscapes, which actually we did a whole feature in the magazine on my cycling landscapes, which have over the last decade or so become some of my absolute favorite photographs. And it took time to not want to jump in the middle of the action, but to step back and look at it from afar. And same with the storytelling. I used to want those exclusive interviews, and I've quite honestly interviewed almost every A-list rider. That's changing now as I step back, but until very recently that was the case. And yet the stories that I found I enjoy the most were the more obscure stories, like especially the feature that we just talked about on cubism and futurism, and the relationship to art and cycling, and these different niches of the sport. I've just come to really admire, or any feature about any cyclist that has some other passion, be it like visiting with Francesco Moser at his vineyard and talking about wine and bikes, or whatever. It might not be the classic race story anymore, but there's so many stories to tell in this sport, and I really have enjoyed telling some of the more lesser known ones.
All right, Bill, if there was one rider that you could sit down, have a coffee or a glass of wine or a bottle of wine with these days, who would it be?
Well, can I resurrect? Can I have a spiritual conversation, or do we want to live in? I,
Let's go both. You can have both.
so I missed sort of Pantani. I was not really deeply into the sport enough.
I knew you were going to say
To get to
Pantani.
know him, and for me, he's everything. The arc, where he came from as a little kid, and his death, and the doping, and the glory, and the weight of a nation. All of it. It's just like it's the pageant of cycling, like sucked into one person. And then I just, is Bahamonte still alive?
No, he passed away,
Yeah, okay.
I
Well,
believe, just last
I don't
year.
get
Jeez
to say,
Louise.
uh, it's similar. It's just like, what a wonderful nut. What a wonderful gifted nut. And, today, I would have to say right now, if I were going to sit down with anyone, just having watched LBL yesterday, my God, this 19-year-old kid from France. Like I just want I just wonder, what is it like to have that kind of talent at that age, and to just kind of be. I mean, he's probably always known he's got that talent, right? Paul Seixas we're talking about. But to now be putting that right up against Tade and discovering what he has, it just makes me. There are these like, what was it like to be like Einstein or Jimi Hendrix, or, like, what would these humans have, when they get so much talent in them, some of them have trouble containing it. And I just think he's fascinating. Let's see what happens, right? He's 19,
Mhm.
burn out, but my God, to watch him on Redoubt.
Larry Duke, yeah, it was amazing.
Whew.
Yes.
So that's my answer. Since only yesterday.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
Do I get the same?
I was going to say, yeah, James, what's
Yeah,
yours?
because as I listened to Bill, I started thinking about mine, of course, obviously. Well, I did have the honor of interviewing Pantani once or twice, I think. Matter of fact, one of my more memorable moments, I actually went up to his hotel room door and knocked on it, and and tried to get an interview that way. That didn't go over too well. But he did say come back later, which was at the end of the tour, and he did give me some time in my fledgling Italian, which is still quite fledgling, but Italians are always so gracious when you try to speak their language. They make such an effort. So yeah, I did actually have that opportunity, and one of my favorite pictures ever was of him winning up on the Alpe d'Huez. So I feel fortunate that in that regard. Although I think it took me a lot longer to really understand the genius of Pantani. I was there. He was a rider like many others, a great rider like many others, but I didn't quite understand the singular genius of him at the moment. Well, the two I would most like to sit down with would be the two ends of the spectrum, maybe not ends, but two different sides of the spectrum. I have been doing also a series of portraits on historic champions. I did Audrey van der Poel and his wife Corrine recently, but I did. I think I was the last person to interview Rick Van Looy, probably the greatest classics rider ever. Freddie Martins, Roger de Villemainck, Raphael Gimignani, all those guys. And there's still coming one big missing one would be Eddie Merckx. So I would love to sit down with him. It's something that's been in my head for years. I did meet him years ago, and he used to be at most of the races. You just grab him for a quick quote about whatever race he was there presiding over, and he was always very amenable. But I'd like to really sit down and also do some portraits of him. And then Paul Sixus. I mean, it's he might be the first major rider that I actually don't get a chance to sit down with, but I might, and who knows. And also, I mean, I got into the sport the year after Laurent Fignon narrowly lost the Tour de France. I live in France. I have been reading and following French cyclists for decades and decades now. And the great French hope, and you kind of know at the back of your mind that unless the stars perfectly aligned, none of these guys were actually real Tour winners. I mean, there was a chance that Alaphilippe could win the Tour. There was a chance that Thomas Voeckler could win the Tour, if the circumstances were just right, and those came actually pretty close. But to have a guy that's up there with Toddy, up there with Jonas, up there with the greats of the last 30 years, that really looks to be an international force that could be finally that first French winner of the Tour de France since Bernard Hinault. I mean, I never thought I'd see that day, and when I look at him, when I saw Liège yesterday, I was like, I may still live to see that day, maybe still during my career, and that would be amazing. So yeah, I would love to sit down with him.
We also have to point out I was going to say the other French winner of the Tour de France. We have to say Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, who would actually be my pick for who I would want to sit down with, because I think women's cycling is still so fledgling in how popular it is and in who these riders are that I think everyone knows who PFP is, but I don't think people know who she really is. And if I could sit down with her and actually do a full, just no holds barred, we're actually going to talk, people are going to actually get to know her, like, that's the one that I want.
You know what I loved about her Tour win was she was like, hey, this is what it's going to take. That like like you're saying, it's nascent, right? It's been around forever. We've had women's Tour de France's and lots of forums before. Now it finally feels like we've got the momentum. There's something there. It's going to build. Still, though, early in its development stage. And she came in and she was like, okay, here's how you get specialized if you're going to win a Grand Tour against me. I thought that was really paradigm changing.
It was. I didn't put her in because I actually had the honor of spending an hour with her last year in January at the training camp, and I did a big feature for Rouleur magazine. And I've been following her for years because she impresses me so much in her ability to break down what it takes to win And to I mean, for years it was how am I going to get that? How am I going to get that Olympic gold medal? And she had a terrible setback 4 years prior. People were like, didn't even know if she was going to be around 4 years later, and she just steadfast focus. Did psychological work, bike handling work, all kinds of work to get to that.
And anyone that can be, that good of a teammate with Mariana Voss,
Can we
I love.
Can we please get that Cobble Trophy for Voss before this is all over? This is all I want out of cycling right now.
Well, when I tell you, I was watching Paris-Roubaix from a van in Ventura, California, because I was covering it for the Queen Stage Women's Cycling podcast, and I think people thought someone was getting murdered in the van in the final moments because I was just shrieking at the screen. Just so many expletives coming out of my mouth during that sprint. And I was so excited for Franzi and so devastated for Mariana. And that had everything. It was everything. But yes, if she could just get that one damn race, we'd be good.
It's interesting because I'm not a fan, but of any one rider, but I'm a fan of every great story. And there's so many. That's one of the things that has always kept me in the sport. Is there's so many great stories. People go, "Oh, don't you get bored?" I say, "No, there's so many stories in this sport." And I came back from Paris-Roubaix. I think it was my 34th. I can't quite remember. And I was having late dinner with my wife. Just that was one of the all-time greats that I've seen. And I'm going to keep going back. And I said, I hope before I'm finished with covering the races that I can see Marianne win the women's race. I would like to see Pogačar win the men's race, and I think when he does, people are going to be as happy for him as they were for Van Aert, because he's had come so painfully close so often. So if he finally managed to do that, it would be great. And I would love to, and I would like to be there when if and when Mathieu van der Poel becomes the first rider to win 5. And all of those things can happen in the next couple of years, including Paul's success winning the Tour. But I mean, there's so many stories in the sport, and just in the next couple of years, there's still like all these amazing stories I'm hoping that I will see.
Never-ending storylines. And with that, I think let's wrap that up for today. Bill, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you for your wonderful story in the magazine. And as always, it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.
That's
I would
great.
love to share stories with people on an inGamba ride.
Come. We're going to work on that. We're going to make that happen.
Thanks so much for joining us for Cycling Conversations with inGamba. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode, and we hope to see you on the bike soon.